An American man believed to be fighting as a jihadist has been killed in Syria. So let me bring in CNN's chief national security correspondent, Jim Sciutto, with me right now. Jim, what do we know about this American?
Well, this is a remarkable story, and it's an alarming story. I've just spoken to the uncle of an American, Douglas McCain, 33-year-old from San Diego, California, and his uncle Kenneth tells me that the family was notified by the State Department yesterday that Douglas McCain was killed fighting as a jihadi, a holy warrior in Syria over the weekend. His uncle Kenneth tells me, quote, that the family is devastated, and he says they are just as surprised as the country now that his nephew, that their son was killed fighting there for these extremist groups. He gave some more details as well on it. He said that he was raised a Christian, Douglas McCain. He converted to Islam a number of years ago. At the time, didn't raise any alarm bells with the family, said they respect all religions, and he seemed to be committed to his faith. More recently, the family became aware that he began to post on websites, Facebook, Twitter, postings that were sympathetic to ISIS and other extremist groups there. They also say that he traveled to Turkey recently, but when he traveled to Turkey, they did not know that he was going to continue on into Syria. They say that he liked to travel, but that when he went to Turkey, that was the last contact that the family had with him. So, you know, this is something that intelligence officials have been talking to me and other colleagues at CNN for a number of months. This great concern about foreigners joining the fight in Syria with jihadi groups there, including ISIS. It's believed that 100 Americans are in that group now, more than 1,000 Europeans. So this would be one of those Americans that went there, and he dies. Do we know, was he fighting with ISIS or against ISIS? We're waiting for confirmation to find out which of these jihadi groups that he was fighting for at the time. You know, alarming under any circumstances, certainly. You may remember the case. There was a case a short time ago of an American from Florida who was killed dying as a suicide bomber. He set off a truck bomb in Syria fighting for another one of these extremist groups, al-Nusra. You know, a similar story. A kid raised in the U.S. This one, I believe, was raised a Muslim. Here was one who was raised a Christian. He converted at a later time. But this is of tremendous concern to U.S. intelligence officials, to administration officials, because ISIS is a threat in its own right. It's taken over enormous parts of Syria and Iraq. But it has this secondary threat as well, that it has attracted so many foreigners. And the concern is what happens when those foreigners go home. It is the belief of U.S. intelligence officials that I've spoken to, and I've got a number of briefings on this concern, that they may be being trained and encouraged when they return home to carry out attacks on the U.S. homeland. And this is one thing, it's an enormous fear, and this is one thing that has raised the prospect now of U.S. airstrikes on ISIS, not just in Iraq, but also in Syria. It's a great concern, and here you have an American who went there, and he died.